a quickie about shooting in the real world using forced perspective and real world backgrounds. And I'll be bouncing back and forth between this kind of view and maybe this kind of view. And look, I'm just holding the figure in the real world. So I always shoot on my iPhone, and I use a little 2x feature, and it kills some of the weird fisheye that happens sometimes in the standard, which makes the figure look a little more doll-like sometimes. So that's my trick there. Let's see, I'm trying to keep this organized. So right now I have the sun back here behind the figure. And if you can see, if I rotate this around, it kind of gets a little more blown out. So I tend to avoid that. It kind of looks a little more doll-like. And if you go too far, you have this to deal with. Where is it? There. Oops, there I am. So you got to watch that as well. You hear my dog barking in the background. So this I use a lot, just holding the figure. I'll show you again. Holding the figure in the real world and getting it lined up so that there's a background behind it. You can do it extreme like this. You can do it a little bit like this. And then the background gets blurred, so you don't have to worry about the grass looking giant and stuff, which is something I've tended to do away with in my thinking. I can't keep moving leaves and stuff all the time to make things look correct. But this is handy because then you don't have to build sets. You could just like, oh look, there's me in front of, you know, a door, in front of a window, you know, in a garden situation. So that's nice. Just walk over here, get away from the barking dog, and you know, have a nice background there. Again, the sun issue. Here we have a nice thing there. So that's thing one, just holding the figure in an environment and using the background that way. It's very effective. This is the other thing you can do. I just have the figure, let me show you again, on the ground, which I use a lot. I use like a lot of this shadow thing. I really like the shadow on the ground effect. But you can see if you get in closer, it's focused on the figure and the background kind of gets blurred. So you get a little more forgiving background element. You don't see these giant plants. This one's really easy as well. The issue is that I found is sometimes if you get it in the shot too much, what appears in the background there, a giant pot. So you gotta you can kind of do this and get rid of that, which is pretty good. And so that's another thing that you can do. I do a lot of this as well. And I do a lot of it in my yard. You know, my yard in need of trimming. I shoot probably 90% of my stuff back here. It gets a little old after a while, but it does provide, you know, seasonal stuff. Like in the summertime, all this green in the background basically turns to brown shrub. But right now it's really nice because you get a nice green background. It looks very lush. This is where I usually do the stuff where I'm doing like, oh, they're walking in the park or something like that. And then you can also, like right now it's pretty overgrown, but like that patch back on the right there, put them actually in the grass there. This like park path look is really nice right now because everything is so lush. This will be cut back pretty soon, but it's really nice for photographs to have that greenery. But as you can see, it's just my backyard. Be in a backyard. But really nice for photos. Really creates a nice background. And even though the leaves are not to scale, obviously, they're pretty big, you know, I'm pretty forgiving when it comes to that kind of stuff, especially when you get in like this. shot has appeared numerous times in my story. I kind of look at this as like a, there's my shadow, kind of like a big plaza square area in Claremont. And all it is, again, is my back patio. And again, this is the thing you have to watch out for while shooting with the sun, is getting yourself in the shot. It's always a pain in the butt. So you gotta avoid that, especially when you're shooting like this. You get in here and you're like, oh, this is looking great. And then you're just like in your own shot, like that. So something to look out for sure. And I thought I'd show you some spots that I have in my story from time to time. This has appeared a couple of times, this little like wood looking whatever it's supposed to be. But if you look in the background, there's a lawnmower, because it's just a tipped over old table. But it created a lot of interest for me, the wood and the like. And again, it's not the scale wood, but it does pop really nicely, create some interest there. So one of the things I wanted to focus on today in this video is things that you can kind of use to help you when you're shooting. One of which is, you know, here I have a real world environment again. It's pretty nice, it's my neighborhood, but I don't like crawling around the ground. So voila. Use my truck for, I use this for my shot with Tanner and the Jeep with Raina, to get it up high, and you know, but then also have a little you know, platform, so I don't have to be crawling around the ground all the time, and you get a better perspective this way as well. And I'm going to show you some other spots that you can do this with. It's very handy, and you don't have to sit there and if you have multiple characters, you could have them, you know, you can't hold multiple characters in one hand and shoot with the other. So having platforms like this is super handy. I'm going to show you another one that you can use that you may have in your neighborhood. So you want your character to be walking down a path or something. Sometimes this is handy because, thank you, USPS. This is just a stand mailbox, and it's also a handy platform for your figures. So again, lining it up correctly, looks like they could be walking down the path, and it's about the right height. You can kind of play around with this as well. And again, you don't have to sit there and crawl around on the ground to get this kind of shot. So this is something else to take a look at. And I can crank around. Have some houses in the background. Just walking down the path. So super handy to have these kind of platforms. Like I said, you don't have to sit there and try to, especially if you have multiple figures, you don't have to try to hold them all at one time. This is another thing I like to do. Find like scale looking things. Like this could be a scale looking path that your figure could be walking on. And all it is the curb. So, you know, looking at stuff like that, it's like, you know, the perspective is right and the size is correct for something like a walking path, rather than like the giant path over here. I'll show you in a second. This looks more like a path that is 1/6 scale in size, so it kind of matches up well. Right? Whereas if I shoot on this kind of path, it just looks like a giant road or something. It's a lot of asphalt to cover, so it's a little harder. You have to kind of crop in a little bit. Now, scale foliage and trees can be a little tricky. I found this is a tiny skinny tree, and it kind of works with the water spouts coming off, whereas a larger tree would look huge in comparison. This one looks like it's about, you know, I don't know how that would be, what, 6 feet in wide. So it can pass for like a a scale tree, I think. And then of course, if you go in here, get even tighter, focus, it's even better because the little water sprout looks like a tiny tree. So that's something else to take into consideration. But what you get here is if you get too much of this into the scene, you have these giant leaves, which doesn't really work. But like I said, I kind of tend to just let that go most of the time, just because it's easier. Now, what's nice about, you know, posing instead of holding like this is if you hold it, then you have the background is always blurred because of the, you know, the focal length here. So that's going to be something, if you want to get the background in there as well, it would be better to have it further away from the camera. So like here, it's a little bit better. You get a little more of the background, and you know, you're still getting a little blur, but not as much. And all it is put it on with these posts. You're gonna hear my crazy dog in the background, but it's another thing I do is inside the house. I've used the house as a background, obviously, as well. Again, just holding my figure, and you kind of get that forced perspective, and you can play around with that as far as like your angles and stuff to make it match up. Like, I think that's pretty good. The window, we'll go in to the kitchen area, and so you have, you know, the figure in the kitchen, yada yada yada. So you don't have to build sets. You could just be a little clever with how you do stuff. And again, you know, you can't always hold numerous figures, but that's what the kitchen counter's for. Let's see that. So again, you have to be a little more tricky with your angles and stuff. So I'm getting a little closer and a little lower in the frame so it doesn't look like, you know, she's 4 feet tall. So you can kind of, you know, if you have a conversation between two people, that could happen, probably. Pepperoni. A little more difficult at this level because it's just countertop height, and that's a little low, but if you get in closer, it's a little more forgiving, and you just get like a blurry background, so that's nice. So that's it. That's basically kind of some of the tricks that I use for my stuff. I think I covered everything except airplanes. If you have any other questions or want to see any other video content, let me know. And I hope this helped. I don't know. Maybe it did. We'll see. Thanks for watching. Jenny, what do you think? You don't like it.